Three poets laureate on the stage for the first time. We're going to have a contest to come up with a collective noun for a group of poets. Like, is it a stanza of poets? Stay tuned. Rob, we've all heard of the poet laureate, but how does one actually become poet laureate of the United States?
Well, you become poet laureate of the United States when you get an email from me saying, hey, I have a call or a Zoom I'd like to set up. And then suddenly you discover yourself talking to the Librarian of Congress, who offers you the position. So from the perspective of our three poets laureate on stage, that's what happened. From the library's perspective, there's a whole process that involves nominations from over 120 nominees in different categories across the country. It's a whole weighted system, and there's an internal committee led by me that then puts forward a nomination memorandum to the librarian, and then the librarian, who by law selects the poet laureate, does her thing. So
there's not a rhyming contest at the end?
No. Right. No, it's a pretty well-developed process. We've been doing it this way over the last decade, and yeah, I'm really happy for how many literary experts across the country in different states help us appoint the poet laureate, or help us recommend the appointment for the librarian to make.
That's great. I asked each of the poets to read a poem for us, 2 poems actually, and they told us this morning that they are going to read new poems for the first time here. So, can we just go down the line and have each of you read a poem for us? It's a great way to get started.
Okay, I'm so excited. And I'm excited to read a new poem. I was talking yesterday with a group of poets laureate from across the country that it's hard to write poems while you're in such a position. And so every time I feel like I have a new poem, I'm reminded that yes, I am a poet. It's a good feeling. This is an untitled poem. It's part of a sequence. I'll read another poem from this same sequence at the end of our session. The children of trees sprout up from dirt, up through pine litter, up past grass. Formed and waiting from before their birth is the seed of an idea, feasting on air, pushing ever down toward the wet heart of the earth. Emissaries of ecstasy, built from stars, the children of trees are heirs of silence. What the owl breaks open with its cries. Innocence, eloquence, the science holding the world within intact. And so may it be for my children, my tall saplings, whose eyes see at once out and in, whose home is kept within the shade and the wind and the history of trees. All history is the history of trees. I see my sons in a cherry grove, luxurious in bloom, swaying, twirling in wind. My young trees, my once seedling sons, who hear and heed the voice of the blossoms. This beauty is not us, but it rises through us and is a source of joy. Joy floods me for my willing sons, who aimed their perfect souls at the earth and me on it. The children of trees are children, like the children of rabbits, humans, and doves. Their thin branches bounce when you approach. They are so eager to be met. They will play a game with your shadow. Laughter escapes their body through the tips of their leaves. It pains me to remember the summer a young cousin took an axe to the maple sapling my father grew from a seed. He must have stood there for a moment before going to find a weapon. And for that little while, did the tree trust him? Is this why my sons cry easily? and why their tears seem to leap from their eyes like rain, rushing to quench, to heal the earth. Their sister sat cradled in the arms of a young bearberry tree, books and trading cards nestled in its crook. Lithe and straight-backed as a sapling, shoeless and sure-footed, my daughter taught me to stride fearless over the Pachysandra, despite slugs, despite slick, moss-covered rocks, gaze fixed on the sunlight dancing on far flickering leaves. My children, my forest, I am afraid to tell you, but must, about the men, once saplings themselves, who have gone off looking for axes. They will be back soon, and oh, my children, they too reject the distinction between children and trees.
Never follow Tracy K. Smith. Just getting those words tattooed on me. This is a poem that I wrote for the National Climate Assessment, and I've been thinking about that congressionally mandated report quite a bit. And I was thinking about, as Tracy was reading her poem, thinking about how we can move collectively. When I wrote this poem, I met with a bunch of the scientists that worked on this report here in DC, and one of the women followed me out and said, I know you have to write this report, or write this write this poem for the front matter of this report, but do me a favor, don't make it nostalgic. And so this is a poem about moving forward. Startlement. It is a forgotten pleasure, the pleasure of the unexpected blue-bellied lizard skittering off his sunspot rock, the flicker of an unknown bird by the bus stop. To think perhaps we are not distinguishable, and therefore no loneliness can exist here. Species to species in the same blue air, smoke, wing flutter buzzing, a car horn coming. So many unknown languages to think we have only honored this strange human tongue. If you sit by the riverside, you see a culmination of all things upstream. We know now we were never at the circle's center. Instead, all around us, something is living or trying to live. The world says, what we are becoming together. The world says, one type of dream has ended and another has just begun. The world says, once we were separate, but now we must move in unison.
Well, now I have to follow Tracy and Ada. It's funny when you write poetry, I've learned not to go to follow where I think it should go, but listen. And this poem went awry immediately to someplace, and it's called Overwhelm. And we were talking about hotel rooms and various hotel rooms we have been part of, and this came out of one of them in a small town in Colorado. Overwhelm. There was a door between the men arguing and me in the small town hotel when I returned late to my room. Then they went quiet, which can be more dangerous. I became stealthy in my mind. Bad spirits find doorways and stupor. I used to seek lift from the overwhelm in drink. I'd ride over the meadow of doubt flowers to the field of miracles where anything was possible in the blur. I never drank alone. It was the circle that drew me from the haunting to the waters. We remembered songs that we thought we had forgotten, and we were beautiful beyond belief. The profane danced wildly with the sublime. How ridiculous now to think we were happy in the quick shelter we sought from truth. I now understand how a whole country can drink from the waters of illusion and go down, and how easy fury can turn to gunshots, then give way to torpor. I needed a respite from the story, then as in now. I counted the steps from midnight to home, to your arms. The dark skies of eternity were lit with small fires. They showed me the way.
Thank you all so much. Tracy, what's it like? I mean, you get this call, probably out of nowhere, and you're asked, would you like to be the U.S. Poet Laureate? How did you react?
I was startled. And I was also moved to really think about what it meant to serve the art form and to serve the country. I got that call in 2017. And it was the beginning, it seems to me now, or a beginning, of a vocabulary of division, mistrust, simplification that felt new to me. And there was a sense poetry is ever more urgent at times like these, like this one.
Right.
But it was also a daunting time to think about moving into the public, professing truth as I see it. And so I had to think about it.
So you didn't say yes, yes,
I
yes.
actually, I feel embarrassed of myself because I said to Dr. Hayden, you know, this beautiful blessing of a human. I said, I am so honored. Can I just think about this for one day? Because I really wanted to be able to rise to that occasion.
Sure.
And I wanted to think about what that would mean in my life, in my body, in my mind. And I think she was a little bit taken aback by that. In fact, I know she was because she shared that with me later. But then we reconnected and I said, I am absolutely eager and grateful. And it's a charge that allows you to really learn why poetry matters to you and to learn how the nation matters to you.
Right, that's weighty. That's worth thinking about for
I
a
think
day.
I mean, we all should think about questions analogous to those. What is your calling? Why does it matter to you? And why are you here? What are you able to offer by way of that calling and the convictions that you hold? You don't have to wait for Dr. Hayden to call you to kind of ask those questions.
Right, right. Joy, the British Poet Laureate traditionally, although I don't think it's this way anymore, but it was an official position, and you would write about state weddings and other official and births and things like that. It came with a certain amount of prescribed responsibilities, but the U.S. Poet Laureate isn't like that. What instructions do you get?
Well, I always gave thanks that I wasn't the poet laureate of Great Britain because of that. They have to. Can you imagine? Yeah. With everything that's gone on, writing poetry. Well, we do write poetry. It's in it. Poetry encapsulates everything that's going on. We talk about in our metaphorical and the language beyond language. The language beyond words. We really talk about the spirit about what's going on. But what was the question?
Is there like a manual they give you? Here, do this. says
No,
Poet Laureate.
actually, I remember Rob saying that it's up to every poet, what you do with it. It is, and I reminded Rob and the staff when they had me working really hard that we said that it was an honorary position. But yeah, you craft it according, it's crafted. I guess it's evolved too. It's evolved from the beginning of it. But you craft, what you're going to, how you're going to step into that position. And like Tracy, I didn't say, all of that you said ran through my mind quickly when I was asked. I thought my first thought though was I had just told my agent that I didn't want any more interviews. I was tired. I was tired of being interviewed, and the first thing I thought, oh no. But it was something I felt like, and I still feel, it's all our positions are service positions. Mm-hmm. Even if you're king, even if you're king of everything, you're in a service position. Mm-hmm. And I realized, in that moment where all these questions started running through my mind, because I thought, is this something, I knew, there's things that your spirit knows, like, to become a poet, can you imagine being a single mother with 2 children, going to school, trying to get a degree when all the Native students were going into law and useful, to law education, and to announce that you're going to be a poet? That makes no sense at all. Mm-hmm. But there's a knowing there. Mm-hmm. And I think with this position, I have stepped into things. Sometimes it didn't make sense to anybody with poetry. Mm-hmm. And so that's the story.
Excellent. Ada, how does it change one's life to become poet laureate?
Yeah.
It does, I suppose.
Yeah. I think there's sort of multiple ways that it changes your life. And one of them is, I think, that you start to really think about what it is that you believe in. Mm-hmm. And I think you get asked so many times, how does poetry do this? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And you start to think, does it do that? Yeah. And there's a moment where it wobbles you a little bit off of whatever certainty that you might hold in your heart. And you start to wonder, can language have possibilities? Yeah. Can the human soul be revived through the arts? All of these things.
Those are big.
Yeah, these big questions that become really questions of your life. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it allowed for a opening of possibilities and a curiosity of who I was and what my purpose was. And I think that it has changed me and altered me in ways that have doubled down on some things and released other things. Yeah. And I think there's a part of me that came away. I just finished in April, technically May, and there was a part of me at the end that said, well, all of this is an illusion anyway, right? Like, what is reality even? Everyone's like, how are you now? What are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm becoming stranger. And I believe it. I'm getting weirder. But I think it does allow for this. You just keep asking yourself so many different kinds of questions in a public platform through one of the most ethereal, beautiful art forms that allow for endless curiosity and endless possibility. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, it's a deep building and a deep unraveling at the same time.
That's deep. That's very deep. It's just, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that, or if you don't know this, that there was a law that established the Poet Laureateship in 1985. And according to the law, the Poets Laureate do not need to take on a project. They're appointed by the librarian based on merit. And there's just been this kind of culture of poets taking on projects that they care about. And I mean, these 3 Poets Laureate here, I think, took on amazingly wonderful complementary projects, but we didn't ask them to do that when we first made the call.
It comes with a modest honorarium and a gorgeous, gorgeous office, right?
Yeah.
Overlooking the Capitol building.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about those projects. It strikes me as curious that each of you designed projects that got you out of Washington. We call you here and then you immediately go away. I'll stop on that theme. Tracy, can you tell us how you went about identifying a need and then developed a poetry project that could in some way address it or meet it?
You know how sometimes people say, if you can articulate to yourself a sense of what you want to do, the universe will find a way to make that possible? So I had just been thinking, America is arguing all the time. We have doubled down on our vocabulary of combat. We have opinions and we wield them. Politics is but one context of many in which we do that. And I was thinking, God, you know, if poetry could come into some of these spaces, we wouldn't be so hostile toward one another, because poems insist that you let your guard down and that you lean toward another voice, a stranger's voice, and really listen. You know the way you listen sometimes when you're just learning another language, you have to really give your whole body, your whole memory, all of your senses to that act. Poems require or allow us to enter into that mode. And I thought, you know, if we could just go into spaces where people don't hold the same views and say, forget about talking about policy, let's talk about these poems. What do you notice? You know, what does it remind you of? And then, months later, I got this phone call, and after all of my apprehensions settled, I said, I know what my project is. I know exactly what my project is. I want to have conversations in communities where literary happenings don't occur, in communities where maybe my views are very different from the prevailing views or patterns. And I want poetry to allow us to be real together and to honor one another. And so American Conversations came out of that, which was a project of visiting rural communities armed with a little anthology of poems by other living American poets. It's called American Journal. And just saying in spaces, sometimes like these, sometimes in like community center, you know, like rooms, okay, let's read this poem a couple times and let's just talk. And people proved my theory to be correct, that we could really go deep into ourselves, our memories, our questions, our vulnerabilities, and we could just share. We were different from one another. There were certainly sites of overlap, but it wasn't an occasion to defend our positions, but rather to say, I see how you could get that out of that image. You know what it reminds me of is this thing that happened, and then suddenly someone's telling you their life. So that was a blessing and a gift. Yeah.
Poetry sometimes labors under the misimpression that it's for sophisticated people, that it's for poetry people, that it's difficult. Your project worked against that in a very specific way. Can you remember a moment where somebody who thought of it, who came thinking, I'm not a poetry person, left thinking, maybe I am a
It
poetry
happened
person?
a lot. And I think, you know, okay, these people did choose to come.
Yeah, so they're
that
somewhat
is
selective.
one foot in the door, but sometimes people came just because it was an event
Right.
in a
Or they
town
came
that
with a
didn't have
friend.
a ton of events, or yeah, they wanted to join someone. I was in a space where we were reading, I can't remember the particular poem, but there were some young people, there was an older guy, and suddenly he looked up after hearing all of these different perspectives, and after having said, you know, I don't really read a lot of poetry, I might not have a whole lot to say, he said, wait, I get it. A poem is something you pour into your own filter, and something of the poem settles in it. But my filter is different from your filter, and so what settles for you is going to be different. And you know, on a different day, my filter might be. He just had this beautiful, you know,
that's cool.
metaphor
nice.
for what poems do, which I think is really accurate.
Yeah, can you tell us how your the Slow Down Poetry podcast evolved from this?
Yeah, well, that was such a, you know, I felt like it was a gift that I got to experience, because you know, and Rob and the library folks were at each of these events, but we were moving around the country. These were one-off sessions, and so many wonderful modes of connection happened. And I said, I can't do this forever. And I like the feeling that even, you know, of thinking together with others. So radio, which always has felt to me like a very intimate medium, you know, goes into your ear. You feel like you're alone with those voices, together with others who are invisible to you, but also listening intently. And so it seemed like maybe offering listeners a little runway into a poem that they had never heard before, presumably, and then reading the poem could invite a similar kind of process in the, the space of the ethers.
Right.
And now, Ada has taken over, and then Major Jackson, and now Maggie Smith. So it's got a life of its own, and I think it's reaching different people in different ways by way of how it's being curated and the vision of that voice in the ear as well.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Joy, Tracy's project was about bringing poetry into rural communities, and you brought attention to voices in the land with your project, Living Nations, Living Words. Tell us about how that project grew out of your own experience.
Well, one thing is it was historic. I was the first native poet, Muskogee Creek, to become poet laureate. And I thought, people don't even know there are natives, and people don't even know that we're poets. And I thought, well, they need to know there's a lot of native poets.
Right.
And the other part of it too, again, it comes down to Tracy's going into communities, is to come up with a map. I've always loved maps. So went over, one thing I loved is going to the different departments and checking out what they have, and the staff were great. So we went to the maps and found a map that had no state lines, none of the dividing lines, or none of the names that came about in English, and just water. I always say the sky too, but water. And we got a hold of several native poets, contemporary native poets, and asked them to pick a poem about place and place themselves. Some people placed themselves on their reservations, some in their lands of origin before they were removed by the US government, and so they placed themselves and then contributed a poem and a discussion about being in that place. But the next part, but we didn't have the staff, the time, et cetera, to do it, was to put all native poets from time immemorial on there, and all American poets, because, we all have associations with each other and we influence each other. I came up with, knowing June Jordan, Audre Lorde was a mentor, Adrienne Rich, and I remember loving the poems of Etheridge Knight. And so we have these connections and so that was the next part, maybe one of these days, was to show, one, that there are native poets, but also this land, it's what I liked about your poem with the trees. It's like we are all part of one being. Yeah.
And how do you think that map, when you see that map, it's online, right? It's available online. How do you think that can help alert us or show us the presence of these native voices in places most of us had no idea?
I think so. A lot of people don't know they have poets in their community. I remember growing up, maybe I would have become a poet sooner, because we didn't have the poems we read in school too. It wasn't like now. I think there's a lot more, or there was, a lot more reading of poetry of all Americans. But at that point, my idea of a poet in elementary school was an old white guy in a trench coat declaiming poetry, and it was raining. And there were daffodils nearby. And that was my idea of a poet. And it wasn't until I started hearing, native poets and then black poets, and I studied some of the poetry in West Africa, because I was thinking native poets and these connections. But that was part of the conception of this map, a map of connection.
And many native traditions have an oral tradition.
Yes.
You've talked about the musical nature of poetry. Can you tell us how this map, serves that purpose?
Right, to hear it. It's orality. Poetry comes out of orality. It's music. One guy who writes about dreaming said, poetry is singing on, Robert Moss, poetry is singing on paper. And the roots of poetry go back. That's how I came to music, to poetry and music, was my mother's songwriting. And the poems that she learned in the two-room schoolhouse she grew up, went up to 8th grade in, was they had to memorize poems, and we had to memorize poems in 5th grade,
And recite
which we
them.
all dreaded.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think we loved it at the same time. Yeah.
And Rob, you can talk about the technology behind this. You go to this site and you,
Yeah, it is an ArcGIS story map. So you scroll through this map that shows the locations of the poets, and you can click on their various locations. The map, as you move through it, highlights particular poets, but you can listen to them read. And not only can you listen to them read on that map, but Joy's project helped the library start its first ever laureate collection of native voices in the American Folklife Center. And basically those are the audio recordings and some record of them, the poets reading their poems and then talking about their poems and place. So the audio and the visual are really intrinsically connected.
And it's a good thing it was digital too, because my term was all through COVID. It was during COVID.
right, of course, yeah. And Joy, I'm thinking that we think of technology as like erasing history, of moving forward, forgetting the past, but you've turned technology in a very clever way to counter that, haven't you?
Yes.
This map. I mean, I know there were programmers and things involved.
Yeah, I
but
didn't.
it was your
do it
idea.
personally myself.
Yeah, it was your
But
idea.
used it. It's a tool. I mean, it's
It is an
all.
amazing
it is
thing.
A tool.
Yeah. Is there an easy website, or can we find it just by going to the LOC?
LOC.gov,
Yeah.
search for Living Nations, Living Words.
Okay.
Or go to the poetry page, poetry and literature page.
Okay. Ada, so much about modern life has separated us from nature, and can you tell us how your project, you are here, Poetry in the Natural World, how was that designed to counter that alienation?
Yeah, I remember sitting in the office of the Poet Laureate and Rob saying, what do you want to do? What do you want, do you want to do a project? What is it? And I just looked out the window and I said, I don't know. All I want to do is write poems and save the planet. And he was like, yeah, but what can we do? And I spent a lot of time actually looking at Tracy's incredible project and Joy's incredible project and thinking about what it could be to work in a way that repairs our relationship with the natural world in some way. And of course, I thought about national parks and land in general, especially when sometimes it can be difficult to love the country. I was always finding a way to love it through the land, through the natural landscape, river, sky. And for me, it felt like this was an opportunity to work and partner with these federal agencies that were doing really beautiful work already, the national parks, for example. And so we started working with the national parks, and our goal was to start out with putting a legacy poem into national parks that represented the 7 different regions of the United States. And
What do you mean, putting them in?
so we have them on these accessible picnic tables. And I say accessible because they were designed by Harper's Ferry so that you can, if you're in a wheelchair, you can wheel up and be at the same height, which a lot of picnic tables don't have that opportunity, but they have a sort of one longer side. And they're beautiful, and they're made out of this particular material that withstands a lot of weather, because they're in Mount Rainier, et cetera. And then I would have a poem. We chose the poems. I worked with the Poetry Society of America to choose poems that would fit on the picnic table. We wanted them to be whole poems, so not just a part of a poem, but primarily whole poems. And then we wanted them to speak back to the land in some way. And we also wanted, it was important for me that there was a prompt on these picnic tables that allowed people to think about what they might say back to the landscape. Because when I was thinking about ways to repair our relationship with the planet, it felt like all we ever did was take. And was there something we could do that was giving? And even if it was a poem or a thank you, or an I'm sorry, could that be a way of opening the conversation with the natural world that would give us a feeling of connection.
That's lovely. Is there something particular about poetry that makes it an effective way to counter the kind of despair some of us are feeling about the natural world?
You know, I think that because of poetry's work with the breath, because breath is built into the line breaks, in its precarious relationship with the sentence, it allows for the line breaks to have a pause, have breath, have space. It requires you to slow down. And because of that, you can be present in places. When you read that poem, you feel it in your body. You are more at ease and more aware of what's in your vision, what's in your, the sonics of the bird sound, all of that. It allows you to slow down and notice.
We talk about getting lost in a book, but I do think that where you're reading does affect your experience of reading. And you've put poems outside. How do you think being outside and reading a poem affects one's experience of the poem?
Yeah, I think about that quite a bit. You know, if you read a poem called Uppermost by A.R. Ammons, and it's on the top of Mount Rainier, right? You have a different relationship with that poem, and that poem is going to strike you in a different way. And that poem is about what it is to be the last pebble on top of the peak. You know, there's no more wanting. There's this air, this feeling of, this poem is really exceptional. It's very short, but it opens and opens and opens. And I feel like that kind of relationship with the language and the land is something that I knew I wanted, and it wasn't until the Library of Congress and the different federal partners helped me to articulate into action.
That's great. Can't wait to see one of those parks, benches, picnic tables. One of your poems is literally out of this world.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was asked by NASA to write a poem that would be inscribed on the spacecraft, the Europa Clipper, and then launched into space and into the, hoping to get to the orbit of the second moon of Jupiter, which is Europa.
Which is quite a ways away.
Quite a ways away. Yes, it's still traveling. It'll be traveling for another 5 years.
Wow.
How far will it be away from us when it arrives?
Yeah, I feel like I know that. I knew that at some point.
It's millions of
I'm
miles.
really bad with numbers.
Yeah, it's a long way.
Yeah, it's a long way away.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, and so we took the call in Brett's office at the Library of Congress, and the email was very funny because it said Bert from NASA here. I thought it was I thought it was spam, like it was a friend, like messing with you. Bert from NASA here, and they really presented all of these things about the interest in Europa, in the second moon of Jupiter. It's an icy water moon that they believe has all of the ingredients for life. Although I've learned that NASA doesn't like for you to talk about aliens.
Okay.
They also don't like it when you ask to touch things in the clean room.
It's right there in the name.
Yeah, I was like, it's clean. What if I wear a suit? I really wanted to wear a suit, I think, but they didn't let me go inside. But yeah, so I was asked to do that. I had that moment where I said yes, and then I thought, how am I supposed to write this poem?
Yeah.
And then of course, for me, because of my interest and rootedness on this planet, I thought, well, it's a poem for out there, but really it's a poem for right here.
Right.
And really it's a poem for everybody on this earth and for the earth itself.
Boy. Now I'm going to ask you to read poems again.
Again?
Tracy, would you read another poem for us?
Yeah. We have to do this more often. Lots of.
We'll be back here next Saturday.
Sometimes I dream of a steep hill dotted with trees where but who do I mean by we? Will one day find ourselves sitting, staring out onto evidence of the end. It won't be sad. Nothing will have ended but what had already revealed itself to be insufficient. Small fires will burn, mounds of ember and ash. I keep trying to touch the name of the feeling that will have settled in our bodies by then. After knowledge and regret, after hope and steadier, more certain because more honest. More honest because we will by then have seen our biggest lies, the final and most dire, shatter above us in the common sky, taking away everything with them that needed to go. I see us there on the hill, but who do I mean by us? Some combing fingers through long tufts of grass, others leaning back on our hands or hugging our own bent knees, watching in the same direction, out and down upon the passive distance. All of us? All, I guess? Nothing remaining to battle over, nothing to hide, no rewards for what we've long prized. I see us astonished, finally, and each differently. Some of the forest of us at home in the silence, others talking softly in our original voices.
It's gorgeous.
Beautiful. I love the ending of that. Now I'm going to think about our original voices. I love that. I'll read the poem that is engraved on the spacecraft. And I'll say that it's engraved in my own handwriting. And I asked Lawrence from NASA, I said, now, did you know that I had good handwriting? Did you think that I had good handwriting? And he said, I had no idea. I was like, that's a big risk. Like, what if I, dotted my I's with hearts? I also should say that they asked me to write a poem, and they said, it couldn't be super long, right? They couldn't have another spacecraft to carry my poem. But they also said that they wanted it to be read by someone in the 4th grade level, and I immediately thought that aliens could only read at the 4th grade level. And I was sitting with Rob taking this call, and I thought, don't say that, Ina. Don't say it out loud. And then, yes, I was like, oh, no, right, it's for us. It's for us. But to dovetail with Tracy's beautiful poem, the hardest thing about this poem for me was to use the word we, because I kept trying to figure out who is we, who is us. And then I opened up, for me, the poem so that it was all creatures of the planet. In praise of mystery. Arching under the night sky, inky with black expansiveness, we point to the planets we know. We pin quick wishes on stars. From Earth, we read the sky as if it is an unerring book of the universe, expert and evident. Still, there are mysteries below our sky. The whale song, the songbird singing its call in the bough of a wind-shaken tree. We are creatures of constant awe, curious at beauty, at leaf and blossom, at grief and pleasure, sun and shadow. And it is not darkness that unites us, not the cold distance of space, but the offering of water. Each drop of rain, each rivulet, each pulse, each vein. Oh, second moon, we too are made of water, of vast and beckoning seas. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small, invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark.
Wow. beautiful. This one is called Shapeshifter. My granddaughter, through my son, has a half-brother, and he disappeared. And we haven't found him. He left suicide notes, but rumors are he applied for a position in a casino. But all kinds of things have been happening around this story. Shapeshifter. The white deer appeared on the road to his sister as she returned from looking for him. We looked for signs everywhere. There was the wrecked car, a lost shoe, and mystery. He's been gone over 7 days, then 9, then now, somewhere in the woods, in the rain, in the forever of the spinning map of his mind. The mind hungers for water over rocks, the companionship of trees, and how light and the winds play together against the skin of the earth. All we have is the evidence left in his tracks. A favored brother in a house without a father, a boy who liked cars and dinosaurs, a man without a map who loved his mother, a phantom who convinced him to run from a story in which he no longer saw himself. It must have been something like this as he sunk down into the earth, to know himself again as earth, as he began to hear himself dream again. First, it was the deer's heart that changed him, how it made a song like a lullaby, in a time long before there were human words to hurt him. The song memorized him. Then those luminous eyes that could see through the night, the tender ears turning toward each even imperceptible sound. That nose, a silky antenna, the graceful being who could leap any obstacle of fear or shame or for the wild joy of it. I am a white deer, he said, as he escaped through the trees. I am the first light of awakening and the last light of leaving. Then no one, not even the haunting, could find him.
Wow.
Would you all be willing to take a question or two?
Sure.
I think there are microphones out there. Yes, I see one there and one there.
Okay.
Be brief.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll try. I'm a poet as well, so that's hard for me. I was going to ask, are there poets you're reading right now, and what poets, or how did you come to their work, either previously or the thing that you are reading right now, if that's somebody that you've been reading previously?
I've been reading a lot of Rumi lately, a poet I had never really dwelt with. And in part, it's a theological appetite that his voice feeds. And in part, it has to do with the wild risks and journeys that his poems remind me poetry has long, been invested in making possible.
I've been reading a lot of Francisco X. Alarcon's work and be reminded of what it is to see work translated right on the page. And then I'm also spending a lot of time, this is such a poetry answer, but with Emily Dickinson. It turns out she's really good, you guys. But I really, the mystery of her work is just, it's still expansive and astounding.
I've been listening to and reading a lot of song lyrics. I'm the Bob Dylan Center Artist in Residence, and I've been put into situations singing and with things I never thought I would do. But I've been reading Rosanne Cash's memoir and listening to and reading her lyrics. And she always leads to poets. This one poem by Philip Larkin about the, what is it? I don't have this right notebook here. But you know, it's like one poem leads you to another, to another, to another. I taught a class like that once, where students brought in their favorite poem. It couldn't be their own. And, and then we looked at who their favorite,
Yeah.
who taught them, and that was the class.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, over here.
Hi. So this is a question for any of you or all of you, but Ada, you mentioned at the beginning how you wrote a poem to go at the beginning of a congressional study, and then NASA asked you to write a poem to go into space.
Yeah.
What is it like to write on demand, like
Yeah.
given a prompt like that or request?
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
That's it.
No, I find I have so much respect and awe for people who can write occasional poems and really respond to a prompt. I think that they were really, it's very hard. It's very difficult for me. And I think in both cases, I said yes to the right things. I really believe in a wholehearted yes, that they were the right projects. I said no, as I'm sure both of these people have said many times, no to requests for commissions or things that don't feel right. So I think a lot of it was about feeling right about those projects. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi there. As an ego poet, I just want to say y'all are my heroes. And first of all, I wanted to ask how you go about condensing these massive ideas and emotions you may have about the climate into short packets of poetry. And what would you say is your rough success rate in terms of writing things that hit versus things that just sort of stay in the draft pile?
Who's taking that first?
Yeah.
Well, I would take the first part of it is that you bring it small.
Yeah.
And you bring it close to your heart. You know, even if it's something huge, you have to bring it in to, and bring it very close to you.
And sometimes that sense of compression is late in the game.
Yeah.
You know, I love to be able to spill
Right.
and then discover what the poem is, discover what the question is that the poem emerges from, and then that might mean it, or it usually means it will change. I don't think about hits and misses that much. I think the things that maybe have so far missed have a lifespan of use that might be still, you know, in the future. I save everything. I trust that maybe, and if not, sometimes I say, the one sentence from this poem that seems to have failed could be in a spleen or a liver that another poem needs transplanted, you know, down the line. So
Yeah.
hold on to
Yeah,
stuff.
I agree with that. I
Yeah.
feel the same way. I do throw away a lot of things, but I trust that they will come back.
Right.
And they'll come back at the right time when it's needed. I write a lot, and when I don't return to what I've written, I know it's not what I want to explore at the time, and I let that be.
Yeah. I have a bone pile that goes alongside what I'm writing, and I put those things in it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, a bone pile.
Yeah.
Well, I trust you will all come back when you're needed. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.